Athlete activism during the Black Lives Matter movement. On August 26, 2020, the Milwaukee Bucks made a decision that would change sports history. Instead of taking the court for their NBA playoff game, the players stayed in the locker room to protest the police shooting of Jacob Blake. Within hours, teams across the NBA, WNBA, MLB, and MLS joined them. For one day, sports stopped, and the nation was forced to pay attention. The moment was part of a much larger movement. During the Black Lives Matter movement, athletes used their platforms to speak out against racial injustice and police violence. While some critics argued that athletes should stay out of politics, I believe that athlete activism was both a necessity and effective. Today I will discuss the problem of racial injustice that motivated athlete activism, explain why athletes choose to become activists, and demonstrate how their actions help create meaningful social change. To begin, let's examine the problem that led many athletes to speak out. Racial injustice has been a persistent issue throughout American history. Although progress has been made, many black Americans continue to experience discrimination and unequal treatment within society. The connection between sports and racial inequality is not new. In his 1969 book, The Revolt of the Black Athlete, Harry Edwards argued that sports have always reflected the larger racial problem that exists with American society. Edwards explained black athletes often experience discrimination despite their athletic success. The events of 2020 brought these issues into the national spotlight. The death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and several others scripted nationwide protests and renewed the conversations of systemic racism. Athletes were watching these events unfold just like everyone else. Many felt they could no longer remain silent. The reaction follows a long tradition of athlete activism. According to David Steele in his 2023 book, It Was Always a Choice, Picking Up the Baton of Athlete Activism, athlete activism has existed for generations and has constantly been used to challenge injustice. Steele explains that athletes historically use their visibility to advocate for social change. Faced with these circumstances, many athletes used to use their influence to raise awareness. This brings me to my second point. Athletes possess an extraordinary level of visibility and influence. Millions of people watch them compete, follow them on social media, and pay attention to their opinions. Political scientist David Niven, in his research on athlete activism and the public influence, argues that athletes have a unique ability to shape public discussion because of their popularity and cultural significance. When athletes speak, people listen. Athletes use interviews, social media, and press conferences to draw attention to racial injustice. One of the most well-known examples was former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality. Many critics responded by saying athletes should stick to sports. However, Steele argues in Chapter 9 of It Was Always a Choice that athletes frequently face criticism whenever they challenge social norms. He explains that activism has often required athletes to risk public backlash in order to advocate for causes they believe are important. Athletes rejected the idea that sports and social issues are completely separate. They recognize that they are not only athletes but also citizens affected by the same problems facing their communities. As a result, athlete activism became one of the most visible components of the Black Lives Matter movement. This leads me to my final point. Athlete activism helped generate awareness, encourage civil engagement, and influence institutions to take action. According to Lee and Ahmed on the research on athlete activism and social movements, athlete advocacy helped expand public conversation about systematic racism and police violence. The work shows that athlete activism increased public engagement with the social justice issues. In addition, Combs and Casillo, in their research of contemporary athlete activism, found that athlete protests encouraged some sports organizations to adopt social justice initiatives. Professional leagues developed diversity programs, supported voter registration campaigns, and increased community outreach efforts. Athletes were able to transform their visibility into action. The efforts extended discussions about racial injustice beyond traditional activist spaces into new homes, classrooms, workplaces, and sports arenas across the country. Perhaps most importantly, athlete activism demonstrated that influential public figures can use their platforms to advocate for positive social change. As Harry Edwards argued decades ago, athletes have both the opportunity and the responsibility to speak out when confronting injustice. In conclusion, athlete activism during the Black Lives Matter movement was necessary because racial injustice remained a serious social problem. Athletes use their platforms to raise awareness, challenge traditional expectations, and encourage meaningful actions. Today, I discussed the problems of racial injustice, explained why athletes became involved in activism, and showed how their actions influenced public conversations and institutions. From Muhammad Ali to Tommy Smith to Colin Kaepernick, and the athletes of the Black Lives Matter movement, athlete activism has demonstrated that sports can be more than just competition. These athletes show that leadership is not measured by solely championships and awards, but also the courage to stand up for what they believe is right. Thank you.